Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is UMAIRA AISYAH and these are my group members which is BALQIS UMAIRAH, ZAID ZAFRI, AINI BALQIS and SITI NURHIDAYAH. So today, we will be presenting article review about gender and age. Before we move further, I have a few things that I would like to introduce to you guys. So first, we have language and communication. Language is basically a natural part of human communication, and usually language behavior is influenced by gender, class and culture. So this is how basically language regulates relationships as well as socialization. Moving on, we have social linguistic research on gender differences. Gender differences are not personal preferences, but they are deeply embedded in social structures. Basically, both gender have their own significant differences in language use, and men and women are not exactly the same on how they tend to use the language, as well as there are certain expectations between men and women on how they should act when they are talking. Next, we have women's and men's linguistic behaviors. For men, they are usually associated with masculinity, directness, and dominance. And men also usually tend to be seen as leaders and authority figures, while women, on the other hand, are usually associated with politeness, indirectness, and use of hedges, tag questions, and intensifiers whenever they are talking. Women usually are like some sort of background characters where they tend to be the ones who receive instructions by men, and these differences are socially constructed rather than biological. Continuing, we have language and gender stereotyping. In this slide, it shows differences between what men and women are expected to be or act when they are speaking or behaving. When men usually be seen as aggressive, dominant or overly direct, this could affect their behavior where they must adjust their speech to fit in the stereotypes that favoring emotional restraint, authority, and confidence. On the other hand, when women often viewed as emotional, submissive, or excessively polite, these may affect their participation in public as well as professional spaces. To relate it with reality, we do realize that both men and women are not everyone are part of the stereotypes. And if they are expected to act or behave like what the stereotypes is, then certain people have to be fake about themselves and not being true to themselves just because they have to fit in the stereotypes. Proceeding, we have influence of age on language use. So in this slide, we could see there are differences between older people and younger people. So older people, they tend to use formal and traditional speech, and they are usually most likely to be seen as the authority figures. The reason why is because they are part of the older generation that are not used to our improvisation in this culture and generation, so they most likely comfortable with using their own speech when they communicate, while younger people, they usually are part of the people who always use informal speech, and they tend to be more in trend when they are speaking, because certain slangs such as slay, yes girl, are most likely be used by the new younger generation compared to the older generation, because the younger generation, they are most likely exposed with how the culture around the world, and while older people, they tend to be more not so open-minded about what is going on between the differences of what our culture and new generation are using right now. And last but not least, we have goal of the article, which are to explore sociolinguistic characteristics of men's and women's language use, examine factors influencing gendered communication, which are power relations, cultural expectations, social norms, and to investigate how age and gender shape communication styles, as well as to understand how language reinforces and reproduces gender relations and constructs social interaction and identity. So I'm going to pass this presentation to the next presenter. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum, I'm BALQIS UMAIRAH. I'll be presenting about summary 1, which is portraying leader characters through speech acts and politeness strategies in job interview in gender perspective. So basically, language choice in job interviews are essential because they can reveal a lot about a candidate's skills, abilities, and proficiency in communication. This is especially true for high-level positions where interviews not only assess technical skills but also leadership potential through the way candidates express themselves. However, much of the research on this topic has been based on simulated interviews, which might not fully capture the real-world dynamics and pressures of an actual job interview setting. In some countries, such as Indonesia, interviews for high-level positions are often private, limiting the public's ability to access valuable data. The lack of transparency can make it difficult to fully understand the process behind leadership selections. To address this issue, organizations like Indonesia's Corruption Eradication Commission or KPK have started conducting open leadership interviews, allowing for more transparency in how candidates are evaluated for top roles. Traditionally, leadership has been seen as a masculine trait, but over time, societal change, such as globalization and political reforms, have opened up opportunities for more women to take on leadership roles. These shifts are gradually challenging long-standing gender norms. However, despite these advancements, men still dominate formal leadership positions in many sectors, reflecting the persistence of gender disparities in leadership across various industries. Let's move on to argument 1. Have you ever noticed how men and women communicate differently at work? Imagine two people such as an idea in a meeting. A woman might say, "I love to contribute to this project," while men might say, "I delivered great results on my last project and I have a plan." These differences aren't random, but they are shaped by culture, expectation, and something called socio-pragmatic theory. So what is that? Socio-pragmatic theory is the idea that the way we use language is influenced by cultural norms. It also affects how we perceive leadership. In many cultures, men are expected to be direct and assertive, while women are expected to be polite and collaborative. This leads to different ways of speaking and different reactions to the same message. So let's look at an example. If a female leader says, "Maybe we could try this approach," she might be seen as hesitant or unsure. But if a male leader says, "Let's do this," he's seen as confident and decisive. The reality, they might have the same level of expertise, but their communication style change how others perceive them. Next, argument 2. Research shows that women tend to use more indirect and modest language. Instead of focusing on themselves, they highlight teamwork and collective success. This is called impersonalization. It softens statements to sound more collaborative. On the other hand, men are more likely to use direct and assertive language, emphasizing personal achievements and leaderships. Next, let's compare two job candidates answering the same questions. First, let's take a look for a female candidate. She might say, "I feel that the team made great advancement in this project," while male candidate, "I drove this project to success." So both contribute equally, but one sounds more growth-focused and the other sounds more self-driven. This isn't just personal preference, it's also shaped by social expectations. These communication styles affect how leadership is perceived. When women emphasize teamwork, they may be seen as collaborative leaders, while men who highlight personal impact may be viewed as results-driven leaders. Neither style is better, but workplaces that value assertiveness might see men as strongest leaders. Let's move on to finding one, which is finding in gender. Men and women communicate leadership differently in job interviews. Women tend to use more politeness strategies, often hedging their statements to sound less direct. For example, instead of saying I lead the project, a woman might say I feel the team made great progress. When describing their contributions, women emphasize teamwork and collaboration, while men highlight individual achievements. As a result, women are often perceived as modest and cooperative leaders, while men are seen as driven and results-focused. Understanding this difference help us recognize bias and redefine leadership beyond just communication style. Okay, lastly, we move to finding in language use. Men and women use different language patterns in job interviews, which influence how their leadership potential is perceived. Women tend to use negative politeness, such as hedging or impersonalizing their response, which softens their statements. For example, a woman might say, I feel that the team has made great strides, rather than directly stating, I lead the project to success. This approach reflects collaboration and humility. In contrast, men are more direct and assertive, often emphasizing personal achievements. For instance, a man might say, I drove the project to success, highlighting his individual contribution and leadership. Another example, a female candidate might say, we work hard as a team to meet the deadline, while a male candidate could say, I made sure the project was complete on time despite challenge. This difference in speech acts reflects a focus on individual achievement versus teamwork. As a result, women are often perceived as humble and cooperative, while men are viewed as assertive and results-driven. These gendered communication styles impact how leadership equalities are evaluated. For example, a woman who stresses teamwork might be seen as a collaborative leader, while a man who stresses individual success might be viewed as decisive and goal-oriented.
Hello everyone, my name is MUHAMAD ZAFRI and today I will be talking about how gender and age influence language use based on the article Gender and Age Language Use in TV Series and the Impact on English Learning by Marissa Friend, Lina and Wildan NURHIDAYAH. The study looks at the Indonesian TV series Miko's Saturday Night and how the characters speak, comparing it to what some language experts say about how people use language differently based on the gender and age. So, let's get into it. So, the article looks at whether men and women as well as younger and older people would actually follow certain types of speech patterns that researchers have been talked about. It uses two main theories, which are Leboeuf in 1990 says that women usually use more standard language than men, and Downs in 1984 which says that adults from ages to 25 to 60 tend to use more formal language than younger people. The study tests these theories by analyzing how characters in Miko's Saturday Night speak. Moving on to the first argument, which is gender and language use. So first, Leboeuf's theory stated that women use more standard language than men. But in the show, we can see that Olive and Tara, the female characters, actually uses non-standard language just like the guys. For example, Olive would say something like sorry ya instead of maaf ya to mean sorry, and Tara says kau kalau jemputnya cepat banget sih instead of the formal way, which is kenapa kamu menjemput aku cepat sangat. This goes against Leboeuf's theories and actually lines up with what Aldous Huxley suggested, which is that over time, women's speech has become more and more like men. And to give you a clearer explanation, this is the example.
Hai Miko, maaf ya, gue bikin lo lama nunggu.
Iya nggak apa-apa kok, gue nunggunya nggak lama, cuman 2 jam.
Ngomong, kebetulan nggak makeup gue?
Rian, kok lo cepet amat sih datangnya? Gue baru aja selesai makan malam. Emangnya kita mau nonton apaan sih? Stand komedo? Komodo? Oh, mau nonton komodo ya di Taman Safari. Berarti kita mau safari night dong.
Bukan nih, kita mau lihat ini nih, stand up comedy. Jadi ini kayak ngelawak gitu, cuma beda, orangnya tuh di atas panggung sendirian, ngomong sendiri.
Hah? Gila dong.
Aduh, ntar lu lihat aja deh sendiri.
Stand up comedy itu yang kayak OVJ gitu ya?
Bukan.
Yang kayak ceramah?
Bukan.
Oh, yang gulat-gulat gitu kan di panggung?
Moreover, the second argument is language and age use. Now, Down's theory says that older adults use standard language more than younger people. But in the show, Olive's dad, who's in the 25 to 60 range age, actually talks pretty casually, because he would say things like "gak enak tuh" instead of "tidak enak." That means not nice. And he would say something like "use" just for fun. Even when talking to the police, he would joke around saying "apa nih ya, narkoba kali ini," which means "what is this? Maybe drugs?" So this shows that age doesn't always decide how formal or informal someone would speak, because social identity and personal style matters too. And to illustrate, these are the examples.
Nggak enak ya sama Om. Santai aja. Om gini-gini gaul loh.
Oh gitu ya Om?
Cius. Gitu kan ngomongnya.
Ih, papa alay banget sih.
Itu obat apa, Pak?
Apa ya?
Pak, itu obat apa, Pak?
Apa ini ya? Narkoba kali ini.
Pak, jangan main-main dengan narkoba, Pak. Masalahnya itu kasus serius, Pak.
Ucu. Polisi marah nih, Pak polisi marah. Cius.
Now let's move on to the findings, and let's talk about gender. A common belief, like I said before, based on Leboeuf's theory, is that women actually use more standard language than men. But in Miko's Saturday Night, this isn't the case, because we can see that both female characters actually use non-standard language just as much as the male characters did. For example, instead of saying "maaf ya," that means sorry, Olive would use slangs words like "lo" and "gue," and Taras actually uses the same thing. That shows how informal the language is. The key takeaway of this is that women do not always use standard language, and this challenges Leboeuf's idea and suggests that the language use is not just about gender, but also depends on the social context, personality, and the environment. Now, let's look at the perspective of age. Down's theory, like I've said before, suggests that older people between 25 to 60 tend to use more standard language in their conversation than younger people. But in the TV series, we can say that Olive's father, despite being in this age group, talks more casually and uses non-standard language just like young characters did, because he would joke around even in a serious situation like the police scenes. His speech is full of informal expression, which contradicts the idea that older speakers always use formal language in their daily use. The key takeaway of this is that older speakers do not always use standard language. This shows that age alone does not determine how people speak. Instead, A person's speech is shaped by their social interaction, surroundings, and also personal style. So the next finding, in my opinion, is where things get interesting, because the study also looked at how all of this affect English learning. Since non-standard language is so common, especially among younger generation, it can somehow make it harder for students to switch between informal and formal speech. For example, this can be a problem in school when students are required to use proper grammar in maybe tests or assignments or maybe presentation. So now the article suggests that teachers should focus on making sure that students know when to use formal language and when slang is okay to use.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. I am AINI BALQIS and I will be discussing about the discussion part from this article review. For the discussion part, we will be discussing about how the gender and age affect language use in different contexts, effectiveness of writer points, agreement with the findings, and intended audience and practical application from the article. Firstly, the first article examines the ways in which politeness, techniques, and speech actions are used to demonstrate leadership traits during job interviews, particularly for male and female applicants for commissioner position with Indonesia's Corruption Eradication Commission, which is KPK, and the second article examines how age and gender affect language use, especially in TV shows. The article examines linguistic ideas all above from 1990 and down from 1984, which assert that adults prefer standard language over dialects and that women prefer standard language more than males. Now, let's get into the first article, which is focusing on the leadership and language use. The first aspect that we are looking in this article is speech acts and politeness strategies, aspects where both genders are using positive politeness to engage in conversations. Women use more negative politeness, which is deference and indirect speech, and women also use more directive speech acts such as asking for permission. The second aspect is from the gender and leadership trait aspects. This article claims that woman is more collaborative and humble, that shows feminine leadership style, while man is having more judgment and integrity, which explains the masculine leadership style. Lastly, from the implication aspects, leadership stereotypes are shifting, where women are becoming more assertive and men becoming more collaborative. Okay, now let's continue with the effectiveness of writer points. Firstly, the arguments are convincing as they are backed up by the actual data, but the study would be stronger with a larger sample beyond KPK applicants. There are also potential biased opinions in this article where the writer directly links politeness to leadership effectiveness without considering external factors. Other than that, the writer also overlooks about the cultural and situational influences such as workplace norms, interview constraints, and many more factors. Besides that, speech patterns should be analysed across different settings, for example from a casual conversation and professional interactions. If the writers include all of this extra information, then it will help a lot in determining if politeness strategies truly reflect leadership skills or are adaptive behaviours for interviews. Moving on, we will talk about my agreement with the findings. In my opinion, this study effectively shows that gender influences language use in leadership. This is because men tend to be more direct and assertive, while women use collaborative and differential speech. Other than that, these findings also align with gender communication theories where men value decisiveness and women emphasize relationship building. However, speech patterns are shaped by culture, industry norms, and workplace hierarchy, not just gender. Let's take a look at a short example. In context matters, male leaders in egalitarian settings may use more collaborative language, while female leaders in authority-driven cultures may adopt a more assertive style. I also think job interviews do not always reflect real leadership styles because candidates may adjust their language based on the setting need. In short, I think we need to consider situational factors to avoid making overly rigid gender-based assumptions. This article is useful for intended audience and practical application in a lot of sectors. For instance, in linguist and sociolinguistic sectors, they can examine gender speech in leadership, while in HR professional sectors, they can have a better understanding on how interview language may reflect or obscure leadership potential. Besides that, leadership trainers and corporate coaches can identify communication trends and helping leaders to adapt their speech. Lastly, gender studies and structures and workplace diversity programs can have a change in their leadership stereotypes and promoting inclusive hiring. Also, to anyone that is interested in workplace communication and leadership discourse would find this article helpful. Now, let's get into the second article. This article focuses on gender, age, and language use in media. Firstly, from the gender and language use aspect, we have label theory where women use standard language challenge that both genders use slang, whereas the study opposed with label theory but supports Huxley theory where women may adopt male speech patterns. Furthermore, in age and language use aspect, Down's theory has been used where older people use standard language. Unfortunately, the theories got disproven by example from Olive Father Speak Slang. The study has proven that language use depends more on social context more than age. Lastly, we have an aspect of impact on English learning. This study has found that social media and non-standard language has a big influence on young learners, and they highlight the importance of distinguishing formal versus informal language in this study. Talking about the effectiveness of this study, the arguments are looking strong because it is supported by examples from the TV show. The study also shows the effective contrast standard and non-standard language and links them to the linguistic theories. This study helps to validate findings and provides a thorough analysis of dialogues. But unfortunately, this study has set a limitation to the effectiveness from this study. Firstly, this study could be strengthened by analyzing multiple TV programs instead of just one. Surveys or interviews with language learners could also help measure the real impact of media on language learning. Other than that, investigating whether students who consume informal speech in media is struggling with academic writing or not would provide more practical evidence in this study. In addition, there are also some potential biased opinions from this study. The study portrays non-standard language negatively, linking it to language decay. This study also suggests that informal speech threatens linguistic integrity, ignoring its role in natural language evolution. Besides that, language is also constantly evolved due to globalization, cultural shift, and technological changes. Many informal words and slang expressions become mainstream over the time. The study does not fully address how non-standard language fosters social identity, creativity, and community, and because of that, more balanced approach would be discussed in this study if both the benefits and challenges of informal language use is taken into consideration. Moving on, let's address my agreement with the author of this study. Firstly, I agree that standard English is essential in academic and professional settings for clarity, professionalism, and effective communication. However, non-standard language also plays a vital role in cultural identity, inclusivity, and creative expression. Language reflects social, historical, and cultural influence is constantly evolving. The study focuses on negative effects of informal language but overlooks its benefits, such as fostering group identity and adaptability. Instead of discouraging informal speech, teaching code switching will help students understand when and where different language forms are appropriate. The intended audience and practical application that can take a benefit from this article is linguist people, especially in sociolinguistics and language variation. Besides that, English language educators can have a better understanding about slang's impact on academic language use. Students who is studying in linguistics, media, and communication will get an insight into how TV and pop culture influence speech trends. Lastly, policymakers and curriculum designers can balancing their standard language instruction with the natural evolution of informal speech. To sum up all of our discussion today, both studies highlight how language adapts to context rather than being fixed by gender or age. In formal settings such as leadership interviews, some gender traits still persist, while in informal settings, which is in TV series, gender differences in language use are diminishing. Overall, language and leadership traits are becoming more balanced across genders. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Siti NURHIDAYAH binti Muhammad from DTE 0404. Today, I will be presenting the conclusion of our article review on gender and age in language use. So, in conclusion, both studies show that Gender and age influence the way people communicate, but they do so in different ways. The first study analyzed job interviews where men and women use politeness strategies differently. Women tend to be more indirect, collaborative, and apologetic, while men are more direct, assertive, and confident. The study also showed that age plays a role, as older speakers tend to be more formal and respectful in their speech. This suggests that different speech styles are expected in different professions and social situations. The second study focused on TV series dialogues, where women and older individuals tend to use more polite and standard language, while younger men use informal and non-standard speech. This suggests that media and cultural expectations influence how men and women are portrayed linguistically. It also shows that age affects how formal and informal people speak in entertainment. These findings are important because they help us understand how language reflects identity and social expectations. Different speech styles can impact education, workplace, and social interactions. For example, a direct communication style might be seen as a confidence in men, but as aggressiveness in women. Similarly, younger speakers may be viewed as less professional if they use too much informal language in workplaces. These differences can lead to misunderstandings and stereotypes, which is why is it crucial to recognize and adapt to different speech styles and various situations. However, these studies also have some limitations. The job interview study only focuses on one professional setting, so its finding might not apply to everyday interactions or different industries. TV series dialogues are scripted, which means they may not fully reflect real-life conversations. Additionally, neither study examines cultural differences, which could play a huge role in how gender and age affect language. More research is needed to analyze how speech varies in different cultures, professions, and digital communication. In conclusion, both studies prove that gender and age significantly shape how people communicate. Women and older individuals tend to use more polite strategies, while younger men use informal speech in casual settings. These findings can help in education, workplaces, and professional settings by making people more aware of how speech styles affect interactions. Future research should study focus on how gender and age affect language use in social media and digital communication, how speech styles change in leadership roles and workplace environments, how bilingual and multicultural backgrounds influence gendered speech patterns. By studying this pattern, we can improve communication, reduce gender-based misunderstandings, and promote inclusivity in different social and professional settings. That's all from me. Thank you.